Tēnā koutou, no mai, haere mai. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax, and let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Hello everyone. This is just a wee bonus episode for you all. I was sitting thinking it's been such a tumultuous year that perhaps it might be an idea to look back at some of our episodes from this year, not from our current season though. So this is a last minute idea and my gift to you all, an end of the year roundup. I've had some really wonderful guests and great conversations. I've been moved to tears with some stories and been incredibly touched by people's willingness to share personal events with us all and their bravery in doing so. So whilst I'm talking about them, I want to thank every single person, anonymous and otherwise, who's been kind enough to participate in my podcast. Way too many to begin to mention by name. Over the past year, they've taken us to outer space with UFO encounters and they've grounded us with Earth Spirit and the fairy folk. We've visited night terrors and spirit sexual assault to near-death experiences. We've been out in the woods looking for Bigfoot and other cryptozoological beings. We've looked at mysteries like spontaneous human combustion. All these places have been because of my wonderful and much appreciated guests. And then COVID struck, and the world was forever changed. But now, more than ever, people have needed a distraction from everyday life and the pandemic raging around the world, thus searching for an understanding that life continues on after this one. It's been a year of absolute ups and downs, and all through this, our podcast has continued to provide a source of distraction, entertainment, and yes, perhaps education for some. I personally know that I've learned so much over the past year from my guests. Some have touched my heart so deeply that they will always have a part in there, and I've cried along with them. Fortunately, because this podcast is audio only, you don't get to see me bawling like a baby with my ugly crying face, whilst trying to remain as professional as I can. I'm not ashamed to say I have cried along with many of my guests. Some I've so wanted to reach through the screen if that were possible and give them the biggest comforting hug. I've had conversations with some of the funniest guests that have had me laughing so hard at their humour that I've really had to edit quite hard most of that laughter out. Most of all of them, have blessed me with memories I will keep forever, new friendships formed even if only briefly, and a greater appreciation for the generosity and endurance of the human spirit. With that, are you ready to walk with me into this part of the Shadowlands and have a look back at where we've been? Then let's begin. Instead of going through the episodes one by one, let's start with some of the many scariest stories and experiences. Tyler's return from Season 4, Episode 50. This was initially a very scary story, kindly shared with us by Deb. In this clip, she's talking about an experience that happened in the shower.
I happened to be in the shower and I had soap in my hair and I was just bawling my eyes out uncontrollably, having a complete nervous breakdown, wondering how I'm going to pick up the pieces of my shattered life and move on. And so I had soap in my hair. I'm trying to wash it out of my hair. And all of a sudden I hear this creepy giggle for a few seconds. And I almost jumped out of the shower a foot high. I mean, I almost had a heart attack and died because I knew I was at home alone. I did not expect to hear any noises coming from anywhere in my vicinity. And after I scrubbed the soap out of my hair as fast as I possibly could, I looked down and there was this toy in the bathtub that I knew made that noise. It belonged to my daughter, and she had gotten it in a McDonald's Happy Meal, and it happened to be a little Nemo fish. And if you touched its little fin, it would make that same giggling noise. But this toy was a tub toy because it had stopped working like years prior to this event. There were no batteries in it. The thing that made it giggle was broken. It hadn't worked in like years. That's why it was a tub toy. So I picked this thing up knowing that sound came from that little toy, and I'm pushing the fin, shaking it, nothing's happening. So I quickly got out of the shower and found a screwdriver and completely dismantled this entire toy, looking for reasons why it would have made this creepy sounding giggle. I mean, this giggle went on for seconds. It was just the creepiest thing ever. There was no reason or explanation as to why this thing should be giggling at me like that.
From Season 5, Episode 65, called Be Soul, an interview with Dean, an undertaker, and Karina, his wife. They're talking about experiences he's had living in 2 different funeral homes.
I lived in 2 different funeral homes at 2 different times in my working career. And the first one that I lived at had a lot of movement stuff around. All the work happened downstairs and I lived upstairs, really old building. And you put things away and you go back downstairs 2 hours and they'd be out on the counter. They'd be moved. They'd be moved from one spot to the next. They'd be moved from one room to the other. And you just came to accept it and just sort of rolled with it and was like, well, weird, but never saw anything happen. It always happened when you'd come back.
Right.
The other one, I never saw anything. It was all just a matter of feeling. And my bedroom was right at the top of the big staircase that went rolling down to the work area of the funeral home. And I'm an open door sleeper. And I just couldn't sleep with the door open there. I was like, something's on. So I closed the door and then I'm like, this isn't working for me. So I just had a big meeting with everybody that was there. And I don't even know who was there, but just said, hey, it stops here. Whatever is happening, you guys can have the downstairs. That's cool. But the upstairs, I live here. You guys got to get out. You're gone. I got to sleep here. So it's over. It stops. And never another thing after that. But
so you set boundaries with spirit. That was
I didn't know what to do. So that's just what, I don't know. I felt like, well, if I just front up to it, either it's going to come after me or it's going to go away, one of the two. And so I just, got out of bed, turned the light on, and I said, I've had enough. This is done. It's over. I know you're there, and it's just, I know you're watching me. You're not doing anything. You're just watching me. It was just like trying to sleep while being watched. And it was like, and then never had a problem.
There was that one that you felt it, that one bedroom, that one.
Oh, the big, yeah, that really big.
That you couldn't almost go in. It was like, and no one ever stayed there.
No, yeah. I had one room that I never put anything in. I just walked by it. I just didn't like the room. It was just, I don't know. It wasn't any temperature difference. There was no noises, nothing. It was just an eerie feeling about that room. And I just left that room. I never put anything. I never stored anything in that room. I never walked in there. I never let anybody sleep in there. I was like, the room just didn't exist. I don't know what.
So how do you mean it felt eerie? Did it feel like uncomfortable,
It just made
unsafe?
me feel nervous. And I've learned that I've learned over the years now that if I've got a gut feeling, I go with it. Yeah, it was just one of those things like, shouldn't go there. And it just sort of popped into my mind, or your tummy just sort of feels nervousy. And it's like, nah, I got nothing in there. I got no reason to go there. I don't want to go there. I'm not going.
From Season 4, Episode 52, The Ouija Board. Is it really just a game? Comes this cautionary experience from my friend Nick.
My name's Nick. I live in Michigan, which is in the United States. I'm friends with Marianne, but I wanted to give my experiences with the Ouija board. I've had quite a few. I don't mess with it anymore. Probably the earliest I started playing with the Ouija board is probably my late teens, early 20s. It was right when I met my wife now. We went over to a friend's house and would go play with it over there. One of the main, I guess, big events that, I knew that it's not anything to mess around with is one time we were, playing with it, and we didn't have the pipe shut. We couldn't find it. So we had the candle lit that was next to the board. And on the top, it was a glass candle. So it had like the rubber ring around it. We took that off to use it as the pipe shut. And within maybe a few minutes of using it, all of a sudden we looked down and there's blood forming on the other side of the ring. And, it wasn't there. And we seen it with our own eyes appearing. And then from one corner of the room to around the whole room, it went completely black. And like the candle was lit and the flame shot up. It was just a normal flame. And then it was probably a good maybe 2 feet tall. It was huge.
Wow.
And it wasn't even like the flame was off the wick. And so that was weird. But the one thing is, like, the whole room was blacked out and there's no reflection of light anywhere. Like just the light from the candle was just in that spot where the candle was. And then after that,
how did that make you?
At the time, at the time I wasn't afraid, but it was more so like interesting because I've never seen that happen before out of the other times that we used it. And what happened too is we've had this one spirit that every time we use it, he comes up and he, torments us. And we knew that's who was coming when the room blacked out like that. And he started talking to us through the board. And then our friend, she was sitting on the bed, and it was just me and my girlfriend at the time, but now wife, were using the board. And all of a sudden she started choking, and she was like, she couldn't breathe. And we looked over, and on her throat there's fingerprints, and it was to the point where her face is turning blue. And so finally we're like, okay, stop it, leave her alone. And then finally, whatever it was, let go of her, and she could breathe again. And then from after that, we stopped playing with the board. Actually, after that, we were walking home, and my girlfriend ended up getting possessed by whatever was following us from that night. And I knew she was possessed because we were walking, and all of a sudden she just completely stopped. And she let go of my hand, and she put her head down. And I was like, I looked at my friends, and then I was like, what is she doing, And so I asked, I was like, hey, are you okay? What's wrong? And she didn't answer. So I, asked a few more times, and she didn't answer. And then finally I grabbed her arm, and then I was like, what's wrong? And she lifted up her head, and her eyes were completely red, like blood, crimson red, no pupil, nothing, just completely red. And in her voice was like, I want to say like three voices in one, as they say it, and that wasn't her voice. It was, a dark, like heavy, graspy voice. And she said, don't fucking touch me. And then she threw my arm down and then put her head down. And then I was like, I looked at my friends again, and I'm like, did you see that? And they're like, they didn't know what to say either. And so then I tried again. I was like, you okay? All of a sudden, she looked up and her eyes were normal, and she's like, where are we? She's like, what are we doing? It's like, we're walking home. She's like, how are we here? She's like, last I knew, we were in her room playing with the board.
This next clip is from Season 5, Episode 60, called The Incubus and Succubus, which covered the topic of spirit sexual encounters. Bit of a controversial topic, and not one that's talked about often in mainstream media, except to poke fun at the people sharing their encounters. Fair warning, this following clip may contain triggers for some of you, and is from business boss girl who, for obvious reasons, didn't want to use her real name.
I was dead awake, you guys. Like, I was awake. I had my eyes open. I was on my phone, and I was just awake. So I was awake. Keep that in mind throughout the whole story, that I was awake. I was not asleep or anything like that. So I was laying down, like facing up. So I was like, okay, this looks creepy, but I was like this, right? And my nephew was right here on my arm, and he fell asleep. So then, this might be like weird and gross, but it's what happens. I'm gonna tell you guys how it happened. It kind of just happened so fast. Like, I just feel like it happened so fast. But I was just laying down, and all of a sudden, like, I was awake again. I just have to keep saying that because I feel like it's so important. Like, I was awake, you guys. So yeah, and all of a sudden I felt something like, oh my god, I feel like throwing up now. Okay. I don't know if I should be talking about this. I feel kind of weird. Maybe because, like, I'm so close to where it happened. I felt something like kind of crawling up on me, and it was like heavy. The thing is that when it happened, I didn't feel scared. I wasn't really like scared or anything. I was just like, I felt something crawling up on me. The moment that I felt it crawl up on me, I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything, but my eyes were open, so I could see everything. So I couldn't move. I couldn't talk, but I could see everything. And everything looked the same. Like, I could see my room. It was daylight. I could see everything. I could see my nephew, like, through the corner of my eye. So basically, I could see everything. But this is where it got creepy as hell. I literally saw, it was like a black shadow, but it was in the shape of a man. All you could see was a man figure, but it was all black. So you couldn't see like actual features or anything. It was just all black. hear noises. Okay, it's just my dog. So, yeah, I saw the black figure, and that was when I was like, what is going on? But I couldn't say anything. I couldn't move. But I wasn't scared. It was kind of like, I felt it, how do you say it? Tranquilidad. But in my mind, I was still like, what the hell is this? Like, what's going on? So I was just there laying down, and I felt this thing come up on me, but I couldn't do anything about it. So it was coming up, like I saw it going towards me. So like it was crawling up from my feet all the way up, but I saw it coming towards me. So then after that, this is gonna be kind of like nasty, and you guys might, I don't know what you guys are gonna think or whatever, but I'm telling you how it is. So I felt something there. So yeah, I felt like, let's say this is my body, right? This is my body. This is my head. These are my feet. And this is Gina. So this is the thing, right? This is the black demon. I felt it like coming right here, and he stopped right here, and I felt it. I felt stuff. So then he was moving up, and it happened. Like, I don't know how to explain this, you guys. Like, it's kind of embarrassing, but I literally felt everything like it was happening, and now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of want to cry, but like, yeah, it happened, and it went on for like, I would say just a few, probably like a minute or 2 minutes or something. It wasn't like extremely long, but it happened, and yeah, this is kind of awkward talking about. So after that, when that happened, it stopped. Like it was like I just felt it leave, and okay, I felt it leave, and I was free again, and I was in shock. I couldn't, like, I could move now, I could talk, but I was in shock. I was in a state of shock, so I couldn't get myself to do any of that. So I was literally just there, like, what the hell happened? Like, you know, like, what just happened? So I was there for like minutes, just like that, because keep in mind that I had my nephew right next to me. So I was like, was I dreaming? What was going on? But I knew that I wasn't dreaming. I knew that it was all real.
Of course, not all encounters with the paranormal are scary or terrifying. My guest, author and Civil War historian and reenactor and very funny man, Don Allison, in Season 5, Episode 59, I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg, shared this encounter when he was restoring his old historic home.
We had the electricity to the house turned off. It was very old wiring. It had been water damaged. We didn't want to risk a fire, so we had no power in the house. We used everything either by batteries, or I had a generator that we would run outside. And we had radios, battery-powered radios, a CD player. Because we were doing a lot of work with saws and sawdust kicking up dust, I had found a CD player radio at a garage sale. Well, this thing would shut off or turn on its own. It would change radio stations, and I thought it was defective. I threw it away and bought a brand new one. And this one would come on, turn off by itself, change radio stations by itself. I thought, what in the world is going on here? The most amazing one is my wife Diane and I were working outside, working on bricks, tuck pointing bricks, and the radio kept going from music we were listening to a Bowling Green State University men's basketball game. And it didn't matter what station we put it on, within 30 seconds it was back on the basketball game. It was kind of insulting because Bowling Green is the arch rival to the University of Toledo, where I attended, which kind of adds some humor to it. But we gave up trying to change it. I bet we changed it a dozen times and it went back. Finally, when the game was over, we put it back on our original station and had no more problems. It's like we were just scratching our heads at this. Another time I was working and it was after dark, and I had a saw set up in the living room. I was cutting floorboards to replace the upstairs bedroom floor, and I had the radio going. Everything was plugged into a generator. The radio was actually plugged in this case. And every time a loud rock song, this is a classic rock station, every time a loud rock song would come on, the radio would turn off. And after it happened 3 times, this is the first time I ever did this, I spoke out loud out of frustration and said, look, leave the radio alone. I like this music. Don't turn it off. Don't make me stop what I'm doing to turn it back on. Leave the radio alone. So I go back to work, and I don't know, 2 or 3 songs later, the Elton John song, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, came on. The radio didn't turn off. The generator outside turned off. Left me in the dark. And I just stood there and I laughed. And I went outside. The generator, it was flipped off. It was didn't run out of gas. No issue. It fired right back up. And nothing bothered me the rest of that night.
We started this year in Season 4, Episode 1 of our podcast, with a follow-on episode from the immensely popular episode from Season 1, A Glitch in the Matrix, a Holographic Reality, with an episode entitled A Glitch in the Matrix Experiences, where people were kind enough to share their personal experiences with glitches. My favourite experience from that episode was this one from David.
Hi there, my name is David, and I have a story that has stayed with me for quite a while. I was out in the street. It was winter. One of those winters when the snow is kind of crunchy, so you can hear it. You can hear your steps as you go along. And it was a busy night. It was late enough that some drunk people were coming out of the bar, so it was crowded. It felt loud. And I was going to a convenience store to buy myself some snacks. And I came up on one, and it was just one of those regular convenience stores with window glass panes, and this one had a neon sign that was alternating between different colors. So I went inside, and nothing really struck me as weird, really. It was just another normal night going to the convenience store. And as I went along, trying to decide what to eat, what piqued my appetite, it kind of dawned on me that something was off. How this electrical high-pitched noise that permeates, the environment, the modern life. Every time you have fridges or the lights. Electrical equipment, you cannot hear it, even if it's low volume. I couldn't hear it here. It was kind of disconcerting, in a way. You kind of get used to that noise. And the air, it felt still, thick. I had to move my hands, to get it out of the way so I could move through. And so I just kept on going, I just figured it was, maybe I was tired or something. And as I kept on going, I just looked around, browsed around, didn't touch anything. And I noticed that there was something more. It was soundless. It was I couldn't even hear the streets. And usually at this time, you can hear the life outside. Well, I just made my way to the counter, to the cash register, and I took a lighter, out of a lighter rack. And well, everything changed. As soon as I touched the lighter, I would almost say like immediately after I touched it, all the sound, it just came rushing back. I could hear the cars outside. I could hear people talking, the steps. I could hear that electrical humming, high pitch that I was talking about. It was back. It almost felt good, like familiarity, but it just came so suddenly. And the employee that was behind the counter, he was not facing me. He was facing the wall. He kind of just whirled around all of a sudden. He was talking on his phone. He was talking to the hand, but his hand had his phone, so I imagine it was on speakerphone. And behind him, there was a TV that was blasting this loud TV program. All of these noises, I would have noticed them, if they were there before, and they were not there. It was as though I kind of just, I don't know, like, one of those video game bugs where you do a specific sequence of actions that trigger something, that's not supposed to be triggered. I kind of felt that way. And because I touched the lighter, just everything went back normal. Finally, I was just too bewildered, to do anything about it or to think anything about it. The employee just took the lighter. He gave me like the price. I gave him some change, and then I went outside, and I kind of realized that I couldn't even hear my steps inside. As I was outside crunching my feet on the snow, it felt weird. And that neon sign, I couldn't see the light inside. It was alternating between colors, and I couldn't see that inside. I could almost swear that it was only one color. Yeah, it's like you're out of it, and you don't know what to think about it, if you're going crazy or if it's really just the world, and you were like in another world or in a different space. I kind of felt good about it in a way, because I had this experience, and I didn't get hurt, and nobody got hurt, and it was not like traumatizing to me. It was just interesting, and interesting experiences like that, you can share them. It's and it just makes part of that human experience that is so mysterious even today.
I find this next subject very fascinating and just a wee bit scary, if I'm to be honest, because it's unexplained. From Season 4, Episode 46, Spontaneous Human Combustion. Fair warning, this clip does contain some graphic descriptions. On the 2nd of July, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, Mary Hardy Reeser was visited by her son David Reeser in the evening in her apartment. Mary told her son that she had taken 2 Seconal tablets, a mild sedative commonly used to calm patients before surgery, and was possibly planning to take 2 more before bedtime. Later that night, Mary fell asleep in her chair. The next morning, Mary's landlady reported smelling smoke at around 5 a.m., but it wasn't until 8 a.m. when the landlady was on her way to deliver a telegram to Mary that she noted smelling smoke again. She discovered soot in the hallway which led to Mary Reese's apartment, and when she went to open the door, the handle was too hot to touch. She then asked some neighbours to help her get into the apartment, where she found the cremated remains of Mary Reeser, whose skull had reportedly shrunken to the size of a cup. Parts of her spine also remained, but most disturbingly was her foot completely untouched, still in her black satin slipper. According to cremation experts, Mary's body would have had to have burnt at 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 148.889 degrees Celsius for 3 to 4 hours. But apart from the chair Mary sat in, the surrounding area of the apartment was relatively unaffected by the fire. Near the side of the fire, the wall was unscorched and showing no signs of cracked paint, and the upper walls were blackened by soot and smoke, but the lower half was not. The apartment's light switches were scorched and melting, but the plug outlet below was unaffected, and a stack of newspapers nearby wasn't touched. Also, none of Mary's neighbours heard the fire that night, despite firemen coming on the scene describing the heat as so intense they couldn't stand it, but also found no signs of smouldering. Chief Detective Cass Burgess described the case as perplexing, and Dr. Walton Krogman, Professor of Physical Anthropology, was, quote, amazed and baffled, and could not conceive of such a complete cremation without more burning of the apartment itself, end quote. He also stated that in his 30-plus fire investigations, he had never seen a skull shrink like Mary's had, as most skulls usually swell or explode. He said, quote, the head is not left complete in ordinary burning cases. Certainly, it does not shrivel or symmetrically reduce to a smaller size. In the presence of heat sufficient to destroy soft tissues, the skull would literally explode in many pieces. I have never known any exceptions to this rule. End quote. Investigators sent samples of the chair, rug, debris and smoke to an FBI laboratory for chemical analysis, but found no traces of combustibles. They did, however, find melted fat in the rug. There have been many speculations as to the cause of the fire. A local mattress company pointed out that the regular chair stuffing would not cause such a fire, and the material would only smoulder for an extended period of time. Lightning and electrical failure was also ruled out on the scene. However, Mary was reportedly seen smoking a cigarette in that chair the night before. According to the FBI and the police, the fire was most likely started by Mary falling asleep whilst smoking a cigarette, which possibly led to her lighting her nightgown on fire. The FBI have said that once the body became ignited, almost complete destruction occurred from its own fatty tissues. Riding the Witch, from Season 4, Episode 53, is a very old name for sleep paralysis, a not uncommon but very scary experience many people have. I myself have experienced it a couple of times in my life. This is Rhiannon's experience.
My name is Rhiannon. I live in Auckland in New Zealand. And when I was about 16, I had what I later learned was called sleep paralysis. At the time, I had no idea what it was. And quite frankly, it was one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. I would not wish it on anyone. So around about the same time, I'd had a few different experiences around, especially in my house, in my room, but also a friend's place. So we would hear people walking in the hallway at nighttime. I have seen doors shaking with no reason to see a door shaking. There's nothing behind it, nothing like that. I'd also felt presences around me, sort of someone over my shoulder turning around. There was no one there. And at the time I had insomnia quite badly as well. So I would be up until sort of 3 or 4 in the morning. But all of those things sort of combined to, I didn't really want to go to sleep. So eventually I would sort of, I suppose, pass out of exhaustion at around 3 or 4 in the morning. And this one time I must have dozed off, and I woke up and I felt what could only really be described as a giant boulder sitting on my chest, or someone pushing their entire body weight down on my chest. And I had no idea what was happening. I was convinced something was attacking me. I couldn't explain anything. And I desperately tried to scream, but there was nothing. There was no noise. I could feel myself trying to scream. I know my mouth was open, but there was nothing there. Reliving the experience, I don't even know if I was actually able to open my eyes. I don't remember seeing anything. It was an absolute, I was paralyzed. I could not move. There was my arms I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move my legs, nothing. And I have no idea how long I was like that. It could have been 5 minutes, but it could have been 30 seconds. I don't have any concept of time around that instance. All I remember was at one point leaping out of my bed, running into my parents' room, and obviously my parents had no idea what was going on. I was still having trouble getting my words out, like my voice was still quite horse, maybe would be the right way to describe it. And yeah, I only learned in the last few years what sleep paralysis was. And up until then, I still had no idea what it was. And I was terrified it would happen again. Luckily for me, it hasn't. But yeah, quite scary. Hope never to experience it again.
I wasn't really sure where to put this subject as it comes under both the paranormal and unexplained, so I decided to group it with the unexplained. The black-eyed kids from Season 4, Episode 51, a very scary subject and one people think is like a new modern myth, but in actual fact has been spoken of in ancient time legends. There's an ancient Iroquois Indian legend in the USA. According to this legend, these kids could be a being called an Otkon. In their belief system, they talk about a good and a bad energy. The name for the positive energy was called Orinda, the negative energy Otkon. A broad term for negative energy, beings, forces, and things that live in the world around us, as well as trying to penetrate this world from the underworld, the skies, or other dimensions of reality. The Otkon was considered by the Iroquois nation as an evil energy that could possess and destroy people, objects, and animals. They felt that this energy could take on the form of a human and mate with a human woman, resulting in the birth of a child with pure black eyes and very chalky-coloured skin. These black-eyed kids generally never lived more than a day or two after birth, as they were usually killed by the tribal elders and burned to prevent resurrection. It was said that children who found themselves lost or alone in the woods became an easy target for possession by an Otkon, that when they found their way back to the tribe that they came back empty, with black eyes replacing their normal ones. They were said to behave in peculiar manners, pacing around, repeating themselves frequently, and generally causing havoc amongst the tribe's people, as their goal was to destroy the tribe and replace the members with Otkon. They were also said to be mean and ferocious once possessed by the Otkon, often having a taste for human flesh. So, with this native legend, you can see that stories of black-eyed kids have been around for a very, very long time, far before modern history when they came into general public knowledge. This is John's experience with the black-eyed kids. I was down in Portland, Oregon, after a seminar series on software development. I'd grabbed a bite for dinner about 10 p.m, and when I left, it was about 11ish. I'd gotten in my car, locked and belted up, and just started the engine when someone tapped on my window. I was in an above-ground garage on the 3rd floor, so I wasn't too freaked. Good lighting, still some people around. It was one of the guys from the conference, so I rolled down my window and asked him what was up. He wanted to ride around the block a few times as he was freaked about who was standing outside his car. I figured, so sue me, that it was some of Portland's homeless or some punker kids. So, being a good Samaritan, I let him in and we took off. We drove by his car and there were 3 kids around it. 2 boys and a girl. The girl was weird, just freaky, clothes and hair and makeup, gothomatic. The 2 kids were, I don't know, just scary as shit. She was probably 14 or 15. The oldest boy was probably 14-ish and the youngest between 10 and 12. She looked bored and was smoking a cigarette. The 2 boys were just leaning against the car. They looked way too intense for kids. Anyway, I started itching behind my eyes like I needed to really look at them. So, like an ass, I slowed down. Big mistake. The 2 boys sauntered over and the girl stayed against the car. The oldest was on Duck's side, the guy from the seminar, and the youngest was on mine. I made sure the doors were locked. I love electronic locks, and asked why they were standing around his car. The young one said, "It's scary out there all alone, and we just wanted a ride home." The oldest one said, "You'd promised you'd help us out," and Doug said, "I don't even know you." By this time, I was really on edge. I felt caught between throwing up and jazzing. Adrenaline does that to me. All of a sudden, Doug said he was getting out the car, and I told him not to. As soon as he reached for the handle, the 2 kids, I don't know how to say this right, they looked a lot older. Their faces were somewhat drawn and their eyes were solid black, edge to edge, no pupil, no iris, nothing. just a liquid black pool. I just about wet myself, slapped the car into reverse and burned rubber back in about 60 feet away. They started running after the car, so I spun around one of the sports struts and we took off. I kid you not. I was convinced that if they got a hold of the car, I was going to die, and not in anything approaching a pleasant fashion. Anyway, the oldest one was at the bottom of the garage when we came out and almost made it to my side door. We'd gone down from the 3rd floor doing 30-ish, maybe 35 around the ramp. He'd beaten us down the stairs and onto the sidewalk. And when I turned to look, nothing. He was gone. Doug just about passed out. All of a sudden, the feeling of menace left. We went back about 10 minutes later. Nobody was around his car. He got out, got in his car and drove home. He said that he'd met the young one early in the evening and had said he'd taken home, had even given him a short ride in his car to the seminar and told him to wait. Apparently, though, the older brother scared him, so he felt that all bets were off. I was behind him about 45 feet when the feeling of menace hit again. At that moment, Doug misjudged going across an intersection on a yellow light, and his car was hit by a truck. He was killed instantly. I gave a police report and the whole time felt really freaked out and very exposed. I got back into my car, got in, locked the door and waited. I saw the kids again from about 2 blocks away. I'm not making it up. I'm not thinking they were vampires or something like that, but they weren't as pale, they weren't as skinny, and they felt a damn sight more menacing. I left quickly. My only concern now, though, is that this upcoming Wednesday I'm going back to the area for another seminar and I won't be leaving until 9:30. I'm freaked out, people. Lastly, in this area is time slips, an experience where people find themselves, albeit briefly, in a totally different time and space from where they were seconds beforehand. This experience is from Season 5, Episode 67, A Slip in Time. My mother Doris was born in 1922. Both my parents were skeptics, although my father Ron was always curious about unexplained things. Mum, on the other hand, preferred to ignore things she couldn't explain. I'm telling you this as a way to explain that neither of them were the types to imagine things. My mother's displacement experience happened as she was travelling on the top deck of a double-decker bus in London in around the 1950s. As she was sitting there, she became aware of suddenly being out in the open, and she looked around to see that she was on the top deck of an 1800s horse-drawn double-decker omnibus. She said she froze in shock. The streets and everything around her had changed to what looked like early pre-Victorian times, and everyone was dressed in lawn dresses and frock coats. She panicked and tried to speak to the other woman sitting up there with her, but she said they didn't answer her and she wasn't sure if they could see her. It only lasted a few minutes and then she was back where she belonged. She had never heard of anything like that, and in fact none of us had until I decided to do a search on it the other night. Mum was wide awake and alert and definitely not given to flights of fancy. She only told a couple of people, naturally Dad was one, and then me. Again, from Season 4, Episode 49, In Search of the Yowie, took us across the ditch to Australia, and a very interesting conversation with a renowned Australian author and Yowie researcher. The Yowie is the Aussie equivalent of the Bigfoot. Tony was kind enough to share the audio of some of his interviews with Yowie experiences. Here is David's experience.
Sounds like you had a bit of an experience there in the Richmond Range, eh?
Did you know that area reasonably well?
No, I don't actually. I know that we've had a lot of Yowie reports from Woodinbong, just north of Richmond Range there. Yeah.
Woodinbong's not all that far away.
Uh-huh.
Now, look, Tony, I'll tell you what happened. What happened was...
not this immediate weekend, it was the weekend before. So what happened was I've got a property near Boona, and so we drove down to Casino and then went up the Bruxner Highway, and you go out of Casino about 40 k's going west, and you get up to the top of the Richmond Range, and you go in through a national park there for about 20 k's, and you get to a really nice cottage, which is it's up in a cleared area on the range, kikuyu grass, really nice little bloody off-the-grid cottage. Yeah. So we stayed there for a couple of nights, Saturday night and Sunday night, and it's very isolated. It's 20 k's in from the bitumen road. There were two guys on motorbikes the entire time, trail bikes that went past. The only people that we saw in 48 hours. And it's very, it's just in the middle of bloody nowhere, fabulous views and all that stuff. Yeah, anyway, great, yeah. on the bloody Sunday night, there was quite a strange bloody noise. I'm sure you've heard possums and koalas with that very loud grunting sort of noise, and I'm sure you've heard cattle. I'm a farmer, and especially bloody cows, when you've separated calves from them, they'll bellow all night. Oh, yeah. Now, it was nothing like that. It was nothing like that. It was a sort of a bloody moan, a moany sort of a noise. And it sort of spooked Sue and I a bit because, we thought, shit, that's a bit strange. I wonder if there's someone there, Yeah. And I've got and it went a couple of times. There are a couple of these quite loud, low moans. Anyway, I got out with my bloody, I've got a very powerful torch, it lights up to about 500 metres, and I went out into the veranda of this place and just went right around because it's in the middle of the bloody paddock. The nearest trees would be, at least 150 metres away on one side, and then they'd be bloody hundreds of metres away on the other. So, and there was nothing, there was no stock there were no possums, there are no trees there, so there's no possums, no koalas, none of the bloody normal things. And I thought, that's bloody odd. Anyway, in the morning we left, and we left the place about 8 o'clock. So it's a forestry road, a well-graded forestry road, but, I was taking it bloody easily along there, and just came out of a patch of really deep bloody primary rainforest into that open bloody eucalypt stuff. And then, here was this, a fleeting figure running across the road. And I thought, shit, what's that? And I immediately said, Sue, hey, you see that? And she said, what? And I said, bloody someone running across the road. And anyway, we pulled up, and it was all over in a couple of, from my perspective, driving, I was watching the road pretty carefully, but then I definitely saw this bloody figure run across the road, and then into some light eucalyptus forest. But I distinctively thought, how strange is that? Because I saw what I thought was an arm going up to brush a branch or something away. Anyway, we pulled up and had a look around, and couldn't see anything, and couldn't hear anything. I switched the car off, couldn't hear anything. And that was about, we reckon it was about 8:20 in the morning. Right. Because we left that bloody joint at 8, and it took us about 40 minutes to get the 20 k's. It's a pretty average bloody track, So that's sort of what I've got to report. And the bloody smell. The smell, that's right. The smell at that bloody, on the night before, the Sunday night, when I was outside, I could definitely smell something. There was definitely a smell, like a bad BO smell, like someone hadn't had a bloody shower for a few days. Yeah. There's showers at this place. there's no evidence of, like, you know, there's no rats there, there's no bloody possums to get into the garbage bins or anything, but I did go in and I said, hey, Sue, there's, you know, it's really bad. There's a feedlot across the road from us on another property back at Boona, and I thought, it smells a bit like that.
Oh, that's bad.
So, yeah. So, look, that's all I've got to bloody report, you know.
Oh, it's pretty interesting, David. That's it's got a few.
Well, I you know, I'm a reasonably sensible guy. I do a fair bit of shooting on my place here. We had feral dogs and cats and all that sort of stuff. I've got a lot of roos on my place, a lot of wallabies, so it didn't fit that bill, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you see a kangaroo, they've got a bloody big tail that bounces. Wallabies have got a very long tail that keeps straight.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a tail. I definitely did not see a tail. So and it wasn't a bloody koala. It was too big for a koala. And height-wise, I reckon, as I said in that thing to Dean, I reckon it was about the height of a child, or like about, I don't know, maybe about 5 foot. I probably should have gone, because I got a reference against a couple of the little trees there. Probably should have gone and measured that, but I didn't. So, but that's, Colour-wise, it was, again, a brindley colour. Not the colour of a kangaroo. Not the light. You get those rufous wallabies up there. There's those redneck wallabies. It wasn't that. So yeah.
All right. Did you say? Did you make a guess at the distance in front of the car, the range it was?
Yeah. Look, I'm sitting in my office here. I reckon it would have been probably about 50 metres, 40 metres.
Oh, that's pretty close. Yeah, that's pretty close. I mean,
and where I saw it, we were going down the side. This road follows pretty much along the top of the range, and as it goes around a few spurs, there's some quite very steep-sided things, and we just come off one of those, and I was seriously watching the road, and then when I actually picked this up, probably the figure was going off the track. I was watching the bloody side, and I just flicked my gaze up, and then I thought, holy shit. And so probably the middle of this track, 15 metres, 20 metres, you could see into the bush.
And okay, so it was fairly upright, was it?
Not like a karoo or a bloody wallaby at full speed. They got their heads down, you know. And it was the sort of breadth of it that sort of caught me too. Like, it was quite wide, imagine across the shoulders or the body. Because kangaroos and wallabies and things, they're pretty bloody small, really.
Yes.
And I thought, and I thought, this is a bit wide. And I'm looking at it, it was going from my right to my left, and I'm looking at it at an angle of, initially probably an angle of about 45 degrees. Then as I closed up to where it crossed the road, that angle would have changed slightly, but I was probably looking at it, in all honesty, at an angle of probably about 30 to 45 degrees.
All right, and so did you? I know it was fairly fleeting, but you noticed a few details there. Did you sort of register the shape of its head or anything about its head or shoulders?
No, I didn't because I saw what I thought was an arm going up to brush this bloody branch away.
Uh-huh.
And and this road's relatively bloody dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
So I drive an XR6 Ute, so I was going pretty slowly. I was probably doing about 20, 25 k's, you know. That's about the max you could do on this bloody road.
Right.
And so, you know, I saw it and I yelled out to Sue and said, look down there. And then I didn't slam the brakes on, but I pulled up from my gravel.
Yeah.
And then everybody turned the engine off, but you couldn't hear any crashing noises, you couldn't hear any noise of, you know, something going through the bush, which you sometimes do with kangaroos and cattle and stuff like that.
Yeah. So your first remark to your wife was you thought maybe it was a bloke who went across the road, or so it was. Yeah. It was sort of roughly human shaped, I gather. Is that right?
Yeah. And I said, "Did you see that?" She said, "Oh, no, I missed it." And I said, "Well, shit, it just ran across the road." I said, "I reckon it's a bloody yowie." She said, "Oh, bullshit." And I said, "No, seriously." Yeah. I said, it wasn't hopping, blah, blah, blah. I said, it wasn't a bloody koala, it wasn't like that thing at Black Pinch, blah, blah, blah. So that was the conversation.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it ticks several boxes, you know, for the yowie. I mean, the smell, that revolting smell, and the weird moaning. You know, we've heard that before, and then just the man-like shape and running like buggery across the road. I mean, did you notice sort of particularly the legs at all, or?
No, but I definitely had an impression that there were legs, like not legs like a kangaroo, but more an upright. And the other thing was the colour. It was like a brindle sort of brown.
Right.
And that was the thing that sort of shook me a bit.
And this from Season 5, Episode 66, Hunting Bigfoot. My guest Mike Familiant had this to say about their vocalization. Note, in this episode, I repeated the vocalizations at the end of the clip Mike gave me several times so you could all hear them better.
I've also recorded vocalizations that I've sent off to like an army linguist or military linguist. He's like my go-to guy for vocalizations. He's does that for a living. He's an expert, so he's pretty good at it. And he's reviewed the audio and it's come back like, this is not a person because of this, and this, and this is no known animal because of this, and this. Like, he'll actually like list it out and stuff like that, which is really cool, because with like pitch changes or decibel changes and stuff like he has this like system. And a couple of them have come back like, this is nothing that we know exists. Wow. So I think that's where a lot of the evidence comes from, is like through audio recording.
Quite interesting.
Yeah, not a human, and no animal can make no known animal can make the vowel change. Like if you hear in the audio, it goes from a ooh to an ah, like an O to an A, and animals can't do that. So
that's very interesting.
It's kind of cool. Only primates can, and we're not supposed to have any primates up here in North America.
True. probably one of my personal favourite interviews was this one with author and researcher Paul Anthony Wallace and our conversation about his book Escaping from Eden. Paul has taught theology and delivered training of ministers in the Anglican and charismatic streams of belief for over 40 years. Initially, I admit I was a bit hesitant about this interview because I was concerned it was going to be all about religion. How wrong I was. It was about passages in the Bible, certainly, but nothing like what I was actually dreading. I was really interested in how his study of Genesis led him to the knowledge that humanity was a created species by star people, something I have known my entire life from my interaction with my star people. In Season 5, Episode 64, in this clip, Paul is explaining how, when he was researching the Elohim in the Bible, he had a red pill moment.
Well, of course, the stories change, but they don't change in a random way. As soon as you make that change, the Genesis stories shift and they line up in parallel with stories from the Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, and Assyrian texts. This was not known until the 1800s because we didn't have a translation key on all the cuneiform tablets that held the Mesopotamian stories. But once we had that translation key from the Behistun inscription, 1835, discovered by Henry Rawlinson, scholars pored over it and they read those tablets and they thought, wait a minute, that sounds like the story of Adam and Eve. Wait a minute, that sounds like the Garden of Eden. That sounds like the fall. That sounds like the limiting of human life. There's the flood. There's the Tower of Babel. And it became clear during the 1800s that the Genesis stories and further into the Bible, they are summary forms of the ancient Mesopotamian stories, which was a little bit of a controversy at the time. The idea that the Bible might be based on someone else's book didn't go down very well in some quarters. But even more significant than that, the Mesopotamian versions, the original versions of all those familiar stories, are not stories about God. They're stories about our ancestors bumping up against a colonizing force from somewhere else, from the stars, another species who turn up and have a hands-on involvement in our evolution as a species. And seeing those parallels, that was the red pill moment. I can never go back and read those Elohim stories as God stories because they are not. They are summaries of the stories of the sky people, and many of the early Christian leaders knew that and argued for it, and they got voted out and excommunicated. But there it was, right in the roots of Christianity, and that was what I was beginning to unearth. So it's a red pill in the sense that I couldn't go back and read it the old way again. But a whole new world really does open up because you realize there are narratives all around the world, indigenous narratives. You go to Australian Aboriginal story. You go to Native American story. Go to Greece, India, West Africa, the Caribbean, Philippines, Norse. Go wherever you like, you'll find indigenous narratives that echo these stories, and sometimes, the Mesoamerican especially, in very surprising detail. And so for a long time, I'd lived in a world where it was the Bible over and against the world. You know, the Bible saying, this is what really happened, forget what you hear anywhere else. And now I'm in a world where all these narratives line up and they're repeating each other and confirming each other, telling us something very interesting about who we are, where we came from, what our place is in the universe, and therefore what our potential is as human beings, our potential as a species on planet Earth.
And finally, from Season 5, Episode 63, of all the episodes that tugged at my heartstring this year, this particular episode with my guest David Ditchfield, a famous artist and classical composer, was the one that had me bawling like a little baby. He's such a gentle, loving soul, so genuine and open about sharing his near-death experiences following a well-publicised and very horrific accident in England, which I will let him tell you about. That was the start of his near-death experience, although near-death is really not a correct term because he actually died in the hospital, but was revived and returned with creative gifts of being able to paint the most beautiful pictures and compose symphonies, abilities he never had prior to his experience.
Said goodbye, and I said my goodbyes to her and hugged her and kissed her, and we just had a lovely few days together. So I was giving her a real warm hug, and then the emergency buzzer started going. So she was going, quick, you're going to have to get off. I was going, yeah, and I'll be fine, don't worry. But as I did step back, the bottom corner of my coat got caught. It got trapped, literally trapped in the automatic closing doors of the carriage. So I tugged really, really hard to try to release it. And I thought the doors would actually sort of trigger and open, but they didn't. Right. And I couldn't get it free. The engine started revving up, and oh my goodness, this is not good. So I turned around and looked for a guard on there was no guard at all on the platform. So I just yelled at the top of my voice for help, and nobody turned up. So I just started, I looked at Anna, I looked in her eyes, I could just see this fear in her eyes, and I just started hitting the side of the carriage, hoping that maybe a guard would run through, but nobody turned up. The train started to really rev up there, and I thought, right, it's about to leave now. And we looked at each other, and the fear in her eyes was just so intense that it just made me stop and think, this is it, I'm going to die. And I really figured at that point that was it. It was all, I couldn't see myself getting free at all, and I thought, I'm going to get pulled under. So the train pulled out at a real speed. You don't realize just how fast trains actually leave at a station until you're literally on the outside of one, and so I got dragged along, and I lost my footing eventually, and then got pulled between the space of the platform edge and then the actual train itself, and then at great speed I got sucked in and down I went. And so it was just like literally being pulled into darkness, and I was just violently thrown around, and just completely, it was like I was completely conscious throughout the whole ordeal. So it was very terrifying and very painful and very fast, and I got no control over the situation whatsoever. I felt like it was me against this huge beast. This train, this big piece of metal suddenly became like a massive monster that was about to devour me. And then I suddenly found myself lying in between the track as the train was still continuing onwards, and I just kept my head right down, because I knew that it wasn't over yet. That I thought any part of the undercarriage of the train itself could just hit me over the back of the head, and it would all be over. But clearly that didn't happen, and the train eventually moved on, and it took forever. It was a long train, and off it went and sort of disappeared down the track and left me lying there in agony and in absolute shock.
That's only a sample of the interesting experiences that people have shared over the past year, too many to include in a brief roundup. Again, I'd like to thank all of those guests who have kindly shared their time, experiences and knowledge with us all, the acknowledged ones and the ones who chose to be anonymous. I'm so grateful to you all. To end this roundup off, I'm going to leave you all with some of the words I've said in 2 bonus episodes. This first was from when the pandemic was just emerging in Season 4, Episode 48, I've Been Thinking, and the second from Season 4, Episode 55, The End Game. My most listened to episode ever since I first aired it back in June, when this COVID virus was really taking hold of the world. These words are as relevant now as they were back then, as this pandemic continues to rage around us. The ripples of energy that this event has on the planet are immense and ongoing, and will forever alter the way we as humanity work together, the way that we come together to support one another. Patience, understanding, compassion, and love, and listening hearts, especially, these are going to be needed in upcoming times. Please extend this awareness to those around you in your greater community, if you're still able to be out and about in your country, wherever you are in this beautiful world of ours. Be aware that people may be acting in ways that are totally out of character for them because they don't know how to or are unable to express themselves in any other way. Times like this can bring out the very worst in some and the very best in others. How we react to any situation is always entirely our choice. We may not be able to control what is happening around us, but we do have the choice in how we react or respond. Now, more than ever, we need to start working together with one heart and compassion and love for each other. Humanity as a whole has always been a very resilient species. We've been through tough times before, and we will also get through this. I really believe that we will come out of this pandemic with a greater closeness within communities, a greater sense of community, a greater appreciation for everything that we have than before this. Even though this is a very scary and isolating time, there are wonderful things coming out of this, and we must not get so caught up in the anxious uncertainty of it all that we cannot see the beautiful and loving things that are coming out of this situation. If you find yourself becoming overwhelmed by it all, turn off the TV, get off social media, go for a walk in nature, to a park, by a river, by the sea, ground yourself, do some gardening, mow the lawn, do something physical, go for a run, go for a walk if you can. If you can't, try and visualize yourself doing something or being in some place that gives you peace and joy. Look to see where you can help your neighbor, friends, strangers in the street. Be kind and act from your heart. Speak from your heart. Listen from your heart. You are all, every single one of you, powerful spiritual beings. Powerful spiritual beings having a human experience. Powerful, beautiful, and far stronger than you realize you are. Don't give in to fear in the coming times. Prepare yourselves as much as you can. Seek knowledge. Knowledge is power, and knowledge removes fear. Today's bumper music was called The Cost of Fear from John Bork. I'm so very grateful to my patrons for their ongoing support. If you want to become a patron of the show, then head over to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. As a patron, you get access to a special members-only page on the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. from which you can download full transcripts of each episode. You also have access to some interview bits that may not make the episodes and little extras, as I have time to create and add them for you. You also get early access to the shows before everyone else gets to hear them. Also, you have my absolute gratitude and appreciation. So, what are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. The continued support of my patrons makes it possible for me to financially cover part of the costs of producing this show for you all. So thank you all so much. If you have any suggestions for topics you might like me to cover in upcoming episodes, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Or if any of you have any questions, suggestions, or any comments that you'd like to make, or experiences that you might like to share with myself or my audience, or if you feel you might be a good fit as a guest on my podcast, then just email me at shadowlands@yahoo.com. Or check out the Be a Guest page on the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. Check out our Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands, our Instagram feed of the same name, and our Twitter feed at Shadowlands10. And, of course, so you don't miss out on any episode, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. This podcast is available on all free podcasting platforms and iHeartRadio as well. Also, if you have Alexa, simply say these 4 words: open Walking the Shadowlands, and Alexa will play our latest episode for you. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can listen to the episodes from the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. For those hearing impaired, there's a full written transcript of each episode on the website, so you don't miss out at all. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your workmates about our show. Encourage them to listen and to subscribe also. The more, the merrier. Thank you so much for listening today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for listening.